Welcome to an all-new episode of Looks and Wisdom Sundays with me, Oluchi B.
Hey guys, and welcome to another exciting episode of Looks and Wisdom Sundays with me, Oluchi B. Please say the B, aka the elusive pundit. Honey, how are you feeling? How's the crew at the back feeling?
Gorgeous.
Okay, I'm gorgeous myself. I'm feeling good and I'm so excited to be here today. So in the month of September, we actually focused on mother-child relationship dynamics, the symptoms, identifiers, how to seek help, how to speak to your mother, how to know that you had a certain type of relationship dynamic with your mother. But then we ended the month on a lighter note where we did mid-season check-in as well as 29 random opinions with me. If you haven't checked that episode, please do so. It's still available on the channel. But October, there's a lot of awareness going on in October. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's Menopause Awareness Month. It is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. It is also October. So we're going to be talking about all those 4 topics this month. This week we're actually starting with October. So the official Sobriety Awareness Month was actually September, but over here at Looks and Wisdom, darling, we were focusing on something else. So I decided because September is October, so sobriety and the October situation actually does work out. So today's episode is going to be focusing on sobriety, October, Sobriety Awareness. The episode is titled Drug and Alcohol Addiction, How to Identify Addiction, Get Help, and Stay Sober. Our celebrity example for this week's episode is none other than Kwaito legend, Mr. Kabelo Mabalane, okay? And Kabelo is a Kwaito legend. He started out with TKZ, a Kwaito group. He was one of the 3 members of TKZ. It was him, Kabelo, Magesh, and Zwei. And then after that, he actually started his solo career. And then he started running. And then he later on became a pastor. So currently his main job is that he is still an entertainer because he does still do events. But his main situation is him being a preacher, a pastor at the church. Is it Christ Embassy, guys? I don't know, one of the churches. So we're going to be talking about sobriety. We're going to be talking mainly about addiction, how to get help, and also how to then get into sobriety and how to stay sober. So you guys know we usually start with the definition, but before we get to the definition, I actually wanted to give you guys some stats. So this is according to the government website. This is according to Rehab Online. It says that drug consumption in South Africa is twice the world norm. So if it's 5 out of 10 people drinking in the world, in South Africa, it's actually 10 out of 10 people. So we are twice the world norm. And secondly, 15% of South Africa's population actually has a drug problem. And 50% means that 9.5 million people in South Africa are actually addicted to a sort of drug, whether it's weed, whether it's alcohol, whether it's cocaine, ecstasy, we can go on and on and on, and opioids. And then according to SAPS, which is our South African Police Services, 60% of crimes that occur in the country are actually related to substance abuse. The abuse of alcohol and dagga has led the country to be one of the top 10 narcotic nations in the world. So Mexico, all those other places, we sit there with them as the top 10 countries in the world that actually have a narcotics problem. Last but not least, 1 in every 4 rand is actually used for drugs and alcohol. Drug abuse is actually costing the country 20 billion rand a year. So those were some of the stats I wanted to just get through before we get into drug addiction. Okay, so now that we're done with that, let's move over to the definition. Drug addiction definition. So according to the government website, drug addiction is also called substance use disorder. It is a disease that affects a person's brain and behavior, and it leads to inability to control the use of legal and illegal drug and medicine. Substances such as alcohol, marijuana, and nicotine are also considered drugs. Did you guys know that weed is considered a drug?
No. I refuse to believe it.
Same.
Did you guys know that alcohol is considered a drug?
A substance, yeah.
Did you guys know that nicotine is considered a drug? Smoking cigarettes. I wanted to emphasize the point that drug addiction is a disease. It is called a disorder because it affects the brain, which means that it is beyond the control of the person at a certain point. Addiction is not a moral failure or a character flaw. It is actually a disease that rampages through a person's brain. I wanted to get that out because a lot of the conversations, people think that people choose to be on drugs, but people do not choose to be on drugs. They initially get on the drugs as something that they're trying to try out, but when it gets to addiction, when someone is actually addicted to drugs, it's something that is a disorder. What other disorders do we know? AIDS is a disorder. Mental health is a disorder. So there are a lot of disorders, and drug addiction actually falls into the same category. And now we're going to get to how people can get introduced to drugs and substance abuse. So the first thing, very easy for all of us, you experimenting drugs for recreational use. For example, you go to a party, someone hands you a joint, you're like, hey, this is cool, and then you get into it. Maybe you go to La Parada, people are smoking the hookah pipe. What do they call the hookah pipe? Habli.
Yeah.
They're smoking habli, you start smoking, so you just use it as like a social drug, firstly, so it's not something that you're addicted to. So this is how you get introduced to drugs. Secondly, drug addiction begins when you take prescribed medication. So for example, you've got back pain. You know how celebrities will be, oh no, I got addicted to opiates because I had back pains and then my doctor recommended this opioid painkiller and then I haven't been able to get off that. That is exactly what we mean. Your doctor writes a painkiller, you take the painkiller, you take more of the painkiller, and then you eventually get addicted to it because you can't get out of it. Opioid is one of the strongest drugs, prescribed drugs, a medical drug that is one of the strong drugs that people actually do get addicted to, and it's so easy to get because it is a legal drug. And then the third thing is that sometimes your parents do drugs. I know when I was younger, my mom had like a shebeen tavern type of thing, and then it was not even a serious thing. Like we used to like drink what was left of the bottles just for fun, recreational use. So maybe there's opioids, drugs that your parents use for their back pain. Maybe your dad smokes a little marijuana. Maybe someone uses serious drugs, or someone just smokes cigarettes. And you see your parents doing it, and you see your older siblings doing it. So it becomes a norm later on when you actually do grow up. That I know, and all of those things. The risk and how fast you get addicted to a drug depend on the drug itself. And according to data and research, opioid is one of the strongest and fastest drugs to become addicted to. And now getting into the segment of the drug cycle. You start small, it's a recreational drug, you had pain in your bag, and then you start taking the drug in like small quantities, like a little bit of weed here and there to like blow off steam after work. And then because then you are taking this drug, your body gets used to it. So that means that in order for you to get the same sort of high you were getting from the small quantities, you need to increase the quantities. So you gradually increase the quantities to be able to match the same initial high. And this happens because your body builds tolerance to the drugs. It happens the same way, like when you guys started drinking, was it like one savannah enough to like knock you off? And then now it's like 6-pack is not enough. You just need 6-pack, you need vodka, you need gin, you need shots, you need all of these things, exactly because you build something called a tolerance. So your body will need more to get you to the same spot. And then soon you find that you actually now, it's no longer a recreational use, it's no longer the pain, it's just you need it in order for you to feel good. You need it in order for you to feel some form of normalcy. And then now the drug is your antidote to feeling good. You start using it more and more and more, and then it increasingly becomes difficult for you to let go of the drugs. So much so that when you stop using it, you start experiencing something called cravings and withdrawals. This is when you know you have some form of addiction. Just to summarize the cycle of drugs, you get introduced, you start using, you become dependent, and then you start experiencing cravings and withdrawals. And then this is how you know you are now borderline getting addicted. The addiction process actually follows also a cycle. You binge on the drug, you want it, and then the high gets low. You get to the point of withdrawal and negative effect. And then after that, you are then moving into preoccupation and anticipation of using the drug. So that's how you know you're addicted. You binge, you withdraw, and then you are now sitting in, oh, I want to do the drug again. Okay, now we're going to move into how to identify if you actually are a drug addict. So the first point is that you are actually consistent in the drug. You use it every day over extended periods and in large quantities. And then the second one is that you do not want to cut down on the use of the drugs because it gives you withdrawal and cravings. And then the third thing is that you spend a lot of time actually sourcing out the drug, using the drug, recovering from the drug, or being around people who are using the drug. And now, as a person who is addicted, or you want to know how a person will know if they are addicted. They have problems at school and at work. They have physical health issues. They have change in behavior. They have many issues. First one, problems at school and at work. I'll make an example with my sister. So my sister came to stay with me, I think it was like 2015. And then for some reason, I heard that she actually slapped her manager. It was like, why would this girl slap a manager? Like, what do you mean? So she started having a lot of problems at work where she was not showing up at work, or she would not be able to get up and go, and she would not be able to do normal functions for work and school. So problems at work and school. And the second thing is physical health issues. I can tell you with my sister right now is that she was very much a thick human being, and then when she started using drugs, she started becoming skinnier and skinnier. And because she was injecting, then some of her skin started peeling off in her arms and where she was injecting, and then she just started deteriorating physically. So physical health issues. And then changes in behavior. One of the main changes in behavior with my sister is that she was usually an open person, but she started then getting like very secretive about things. You didn't know what she was doing, where she was going, who she was with. That's how we knew. And then the last one, money issues. Oh my God, my sister used to ask me for money all the time. Ask me for money for this and that and that and that, and I always had to send her money. And I always thought like maybe she's got problems, but it was really the drugs. So how to spot someone who's on drugs? They have problems at school and work, always physical health issues, change in behavior, and money issues. And before we get into Kabelo Mabalane's story, I actually just quickly want to give you guys a test that you can actually try out for yourself to figure out if you are actually addicted to some drugs. So this is an addiction test that is done by changerehab.co.za. So how to identify yourself. So this is an actual test that you can use. And if you tick yes to any of these points, that means you might be addicted to drug and you might want to go have a conversation with someone. The first question is, do you continue to use the substance even if it is causing problems in your relationship? So do you continue the substance even though it's affecting your relationship with your partner, affecting your relationship with your parents, affecting your relationship with your siblings, affecting your relationship at schools, also at work? So the first thing you need to ask yourself, do you continue using the substance that you are using despite the problems that it's causing in your relationships? Number one. Number two, do you give up important activities because of drugs? My sister used to skip work to be on the drugs. And you get people who skip school to be on the drugs. You get people like, I remember when Naomi Campbell was telling us about her drug addiction story, she actually said she showed up at a photo shoot and she was shivering, she couldn't work and she was obnoxious, and she had to lose that working opportunity because that drug brain thing was so strong. She had to use, even though she knew she had something important happening. The third question you need to ask yourself, do you continue to use even when it puts you in danger? Like in the middle of the night, your weed is finished. Are you now going to walk the streets of Braamfontein looking for a guy in the corner that can give you a spliff? Or do you go to parties randomly looking for strangers to exchange, you know what I'm talking about, for you to get drugs? Are you selling yourself? What are you doing in order for you to be able to get drugs? And then the next question is, do you continue to use even when physical and psychological problems are made worse by the substance? And I'm going to make the Kabelo example. So he said when he started using, then he started having problems with the media and with people telling him that he was using. And instead of just addressing the thing, he just became more arrogant, more type of person, instead of just addressing the problem and being in awareness that he's using drugs and it's affecting him psychologically. And my sister losing the weight, she didn't care. She was just like, oh, no, I'm gonna die. She was lying to us. And then the next question you need to ask yourself, are you experiencing increasing tolerance towards the abuse? So firstly, it was 1 gram was enough, and then now it's 2 grams, and now 3 grams. 1 joint was enough. Now you can't sleep unless you have 2 joints, and then you wake up in the middle of the night and have another joint. Oh, like 1 Savannah was enough, but then now I need like 5 Savannahs to get a little buzz. Or 1 cigarette used to be fine before work, 1 during lunch, but then now you smoke like 20 cigarettes a day. And then the final question you need to ask yourself, do you experience withdrawals when you do not use the substance or stop using it abruptly? Like if you don't smoke, do you have like, oh, need to smoke, God, need to smoke? Like you get irritable, you get bored with people, you are experiencing withdrawal symptoms. It means you're addicted to the drug. And I mean, weed people will always never admit that weed is a drug, but we're not going to talk about them and put them on blast, but I am putting them on blast low key. Okay. And so that was nice. So let's get into Kabelo's story. So you guys know I never want to review the book chapter by chapter, and this is because I respect artists and people who write, because I'm a writer myself. I want people to go get the book, read the book themselves, because it's always a different experience, because we have different perceptions about things. So when you read a book, you immerse yourself. So I'm not going to go chapter by chapter. Kabelo wrote this book. He deserves your guys' point. So go get the book and get the full story. So basically, Kabelo grew up in Pimville in Soweto. He had 2 parents, but then both his parents were heavily working, to a point that he deems his parents workaholics. They were never there, they were never available. He didn't have a strong relationship with his mother. He doesn't talk about his mother much. He did have some form of a relationship with his father, but that was a tainted type of relationship. So the first time we hear about addiction in Kabelo's story is actually when he speaks about his father. So his father was addicted to alcohol, and he gets to the point where he says it was embarrassing because his dad, he would be in the streets playing with his friends, and then his dad will come stumbling. You know how like the dads used to be back in the day, rocking back and forth. Embarrassing for him. So he had a disdain for alcoholism, and he used to harshly judge his father. So that was sort of like the first basis we introduced to any form of addiction in Kabelo's story. So his dad had an alcohol addiction. In his own words, he says that his dad was using alcohol to self-medicate. So he drank for self-medication purposes, so to mask some pain that he was feeling. And then for himself, he actually started using drugs, alcohol and weed. If you grow up in the hood, guys, like alcohol and weed are not considered drugs. It's like an everyday thing that everybody has access to. So he does talk about the fact that alcohol and weed is like something we all grow up in. We start smoking, we start drinking when we're like 12. And then so for him, like after high school, then he started experimenting with drugs and alcohol. But he says that his core drug that he started using, which is ecstasy, was actually introduced to him in a studio setting, a recreational use, where they were actually working on the Halloween album. And then he started using, the first time he used it was in the studio, and then he said he experienced this euphoria, and this euphoria actually led them to create one of the greatest albums in Kwaito history. I mean, that's one of the albums that we all love about the Kwaito era, the TKZ Halloween season. That was the best season. So he started using drugs during that season, and then the euphoria worked in creating the music, and then success came immediately after. So now he's started using drugs, he's got success, and then that success started feeding his ego, and that meant more drugs. And then more drugs meant misbehaving and having this arrogance where he was beating people up, he was acting obnoxious and being just a delinquent. And he says he had like the most stinkiest behavior during the time where he was under drug abuse. He hated the media, and I was so happy to actually learn this story. Izinja, one of my favorite songs by TKZ, they were actually high, irritated by the fact that the media was sitting on their ass about the misbehavior in events, their obnoxious behavior, Kabelo beating up people everywhere, just being a delinquent. And instead of just being like, yeah guys, maybe we're a problem because we are these people, they were like, yes, these people must try. We're gonna write a song about them. So that's that arrogance, that inflated ego, that feeling that you're above everybody else. He says that the drug will get you so high and so high up in your ass that everybody is just beneath you. They're not even a factor. And so we got one of the greatest songs because of this. So we're not putting too much into that. And then at some point, which is one of the main cause that I wanted to get into, he says that because he had gotten into his head that when he's drug induced, it helps his creativity and it helps his output. He then started pouring a lot of drugs into himself to be able to have these great songs, because in his head, he actually believed that the drugs made him more creative and made him become this superstar, because they were actually even helping to mask his anxiety and distress, because you feel overly inflated and this boss type of person. And then so he started the drugs around 1998. So in 2002, because he was having a lot of problems, I'm not going to get into because I want you guys to read the book, he decided then to go on a sobriety journey. As per everybody else, you first decide and then you relapse and then you go back and then you have to make the decision again, this time very strong. So in 2002, he was like, F it, I'm out of the drugs and I'm just gonna focus on my sobriety. And he says one of his main problems during that decision-making process was him strongly believing that he's not going to be able to be creative. So that means he's not going to be able to be a musician, which was some of that yin yang, whether, oh my God, if I stop doing drugs, I'm not going to be able to be this person that I was, and people are not going to like me, people are going to hate me, blah, blah, blah. But he pushed through because he says that he was just tired of the life that he was living and what he was experiencing in his life. And so he started his sobriety journey in 2022, went to rehab, got all the help that he needed, and then he started living a sober life. He actually says that he believes that being sober was a saving grace in his life. And he's now been sober for 21 years, actually. He's been sober for like 21 years. That's a long time to be sober. And his saving grace for actually staying sober is that he actually had a distraction, and this distraction was him running. That's why his book is called I Ran for My Life. So he started marathons, he had to train and practice for marathons, so that took away the time that he had to be doing drugs, thinking about drugs and all of those things. So he didn't stop doing drugs and then was hoping that things would change. He actually took the time away from drugs and used it into something else. One of the most important things that Kabelo does say in terms of his drugs and his sobriety journey is the fact that you need to find an anchor for yourself as to why you're going to stay sober. Because once an addict will forever be an addict. Even if you're 20 years sober, you might get triggered, you might relapse, and you might go back to drugs. So you need to find an anchor outside of yourself, whether it's a spiritual anchor where you believe in God, you believe in Jesus, you believe in religion and all those things, or you run, or you open a YouTube channel and do something else. So you need to find an anchor, a family, something. And so that was some of the most important things. But again, guys, get the book for yourselves. It's very beautiful. He takes us through his whole journey and everything in between. I wanted to get through all of that before we can move to the 5 action steps to get you to quit your addiction. So now you know you're addicted before because you took that test that we had earlier on. So now you know you have to make a change. So the first thing that you need to do is set a date. On December 21, I'm going to stop drinking alcohol. On December 22, I'm not going to do it. And I can attest to you need to set a date, because I talk about using alcohol in my book also to mask the pain that I was feeling from my dad, from losing my dad and being in a toxic situation. And so when I came back in 2018, I was like, I'm going to quit. And I literally did set a date, and the date was the 1st of March, because we went on the holiday in February, and we're like, when we come back 1st of March, we're going to be sober. And then on the 1st of March, we actually did stop drinking, and we carried that journey for like a whole year. And then the second thing is that you need to change your environment. And I remember when I was smoking cigarettes, I was in this other company and I wanted to quit smoking cigarettes. It actually happened the same year. So March I stopped drinking, and then in June I had a new company I had to go work in. So I was leaving all my old friends and my smoking buddies from the company, and I was like, when I move to this company, I'm going to be a new person, and I'm not going to tell them I used to smoke. I'm going to be like, I don't know anything about smoking. And I actually did that. So set a date to quit, and then change your environment. I believe in changing environments, most importantly. Move, go stay in Sandon Hill, go stay in Sandton. If you're in Danefen, go stay somewhere else. Don't leave. Living is important, guys. And then the second thing is to distract yourself. Kabelo used running as a distraction. Me, myself, and I opened a channel. I started writing. That's the year I started the vlog. Before that, I was just blogging. I was just a writer on the internet. And then in 2018, I was like, so since we've got all this free time, let's exercise, let's start doing a YouTube channel. So distract yourself, and then review your past attempts to quit. So always look at this time I tried to quit, it didn't work, and this was why I was failing. And for me, when I came back from that holiday, I mean, the decision was made there, but then when I came back home, I had like a 6-pack of I can't remember what it was. What was I drinking at the time? I can't remember, guys. But there was alcohol and it was a 6-pack, and my brain was like, first let's finish this 6-pack and then we'll get into the sober part. So I was like, then we will not have alcohol in the house. So that was my reviewing of my past attempts and knowing that, okay, alcohol is a distraction, so let me stop going to the parties because then I'm going to be triggered. And then let me stop having alcohol and being surrounded by people with alcohol. For Booger Life, he went to the church. He was like, I'm going to go to the church because if I hang around with my old crew, then I'm back into square one. And then the final thing is you need to create a support network. You can never win alone. Fortunately for me, when I went on my sobriety journey with alcohol, I had a best friend at the time and we did it together. So we were like, yeah, girl, we sober 1 month. We used to actually put it on our social media, 2 months sober, 3 months sober, 4 months sober, blah, blah, blah. We went on and on and on. So I had like someone who was doing it with me. So you need to create a support network. If your family, your friends, and your associate cannot support you, get formal help, get a therapist, go into rehab, find resource groups that help and do all those things. And I will link addiction help resources group into this segment so that if you are struggling from addiction, you can get into it. Otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for lending me your ear. I hope you learned something about drug, alcohol addiction, how to get help, where to get help, how to identify, but most importantly, how to stay sober. Thank you so much, guys, for joining. Do join the conversation. Have you ever had any addictions? How did you overcome it? And do subscribe, do tell your friends, do like, and do comment. And I will see you guys next week with another exciting episode of Looks and Wisdom Sundays with me, Oluchi B.